Great Divorce, My Life Rewritten, I wanted to ask, and we touched on it a little bit, what are some of the red flags that people should look for and what you came across as far as knowing that it's time to part ways, to divorce, and to be out on your own?
Yeah. So, there were a few different things that I realized after the fact. One of them is, and this was a role that I took on. I became the peacekeeper. And on the surface, that sounds pretty innocent, pretty okay. I don't want to cause problems. I'll just take one for the team, whatever. I won't bring this up. Real healthy relationships have difficult conversations. They're not afraid. People in healthy relationships are not afraid to have difficult conversations. It's not easy, but you still do it. And what happens is that when you don't have those difficult conversations, over time, resentment starts to build up.
Yes.
And from resentment, it is a very slippery slope to contempt. And that's where I got. I got to the level of contempt. I didn't want to be around him. I didn't want to be in the same room with him. And so that's kind of one of those things that's very gradual over time. I'll just take it. It's not that big a deal. I just won't speak up this time. So being the peacekeeper to me is one of those kind of surprising signs. Another one is that's very difficult to put your finger on is that whole losing your identity that we kind of talked about earlier. You don't realize that it's happening because it's happening so slowly. When you
Mhm.
start to think about, so this is a really good question for your listeners. Do I still do the things that I used to enjoy? I used to love to sit and read a book on a Saturday morning with a cup of coffee or whatever that was. Do I still do those things? Or have I completely lost sight of the things that bring me joy, the things that refill my cup? So that losing your identity happens so slowly that you don't realize that it's happening until it kind of gets to that very dangerous tipping point. And then the other one that I share is disrespect. Disrespect starts very small. Nobody just, well, it's rare for people to just throw it in your face right off the bat. It can almost feel like, oh, he's just teasing me or she's just joking. But it can start very small, and disrespect grows over time until you start to hear things like, don't overreact, or you're so dramatic, or, don't be a drama queen, or somebody else is telling you how you should be feeling. And that's not a good point to be at either. So those are things that kind of have a slow roll to them, but they're very, very dangerous as they progress.
Yeah, and those three that you just mentioned, it's almost like they go in that sequential order.
Yeah.
And this is going, I'm going to say, for this is for the newly weds, the new couple, whatever and however you want to look at it, is you shouldn't go into it by saying, I'm going to make him happy or I'm going to make her happy. Like you said, therefore, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
Because what
Yeah.
that does is you begin to chip away at your own self worth, and lose yourself. And then
Yes.
what will happen, I think by the end, by the time we get to that, we'll call it the third stage. If you start to realize yourself, oh, wait a minute, I'm kind of losing myself, so I'm going to not do it as much. Then I think that the other person begins to say, why are you making it such a big deal? Why are you doing this? Why are you acting like that? Because now you're getting out of the norm that they got used to. I don't
Yes.
know if I'm thinking about it the right way, but that's just how
Yes.
like it goes.
Yes, I totally can see that. Again, that hindsight is very crystal clear, but I think that's a very realistic way of it coming through is, well, this never used to be a big deal. Why are you making a big deal out of it now? And
Mm.
my very dear friend has said for many years, we teach people, and that is such a true statement. We show what we're willing to tolerate, and the more we tolerate, the more that resentment builds up, but we're not speaking up. We're not saying anything. And until it either explodes or we get to the point where I got where I'm just not going to do this anymore. So
Yeah.
I totally agree. The younger listeners who are listening in, I think being very clear on what your personal values are, what your core values are, finding people who align to those core values, those are the really important things when you're looking for someone in a relationship. If that alignment is there, then it makes that relationship that much easier. Relationships do take work, but they shouldn't be hard. If they're hard, there's something else going on. And so having those core values, those personal values in common is really, really helpful.
And I like the word you use, alignment. You should be in alignment rather than trying to fix it later to align them to you. You should
Yeah.
be in alignment or a natural feel of comfort and alignment. You said your friend. So that's my next question is a friend or an outside person sometimes is a good thing to listen to, right? If they're the ones that hopefully looking at your situation objectively and saying, Anne, it seems like you're not doing as much with the rest of us. What's going on? And you say, well, I got to fix this and I'm stuck doing that. And then they say, are you okay with it?
Yeah.
You should be listening to them maybe, right? And trying to
Yeah.
sort of read between the lines of what they're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point. I think the other thing too is we fool ourselves into thinking, believing that we're hiding all of this from friends and family. And when I finally opened up and had the conversation with first my sister and then a couple of my really close friends, what I heard instead was we knew things hadn't been good for a long time, but we just figured you were muddling through it or you were determined to make it work or whatever. So you really are not fooling anybody but yourself. And that's not a good thing to be that much in denial. But yeah, listening to your friends, if they're saying, is everything okay? We're not seeing you so much. We're not, you're not involved in this or that, whatever. That's a good warning sign. It really is a good warning sign, wake up call for you to pay attention to.
Yeah. And a lot of this definitely seems like it's a difficult situation to be in. It can also be a difficult situation to figure out, decipher what is it that we or what is it that I am going through. But I think in the end, if it is that divorce or the separation, it is okay to do that. There shouldn't be any type of stigma that you're going to attach to yourself because you're making this decision.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I found I had to shift my thinking on a number of things. The first thing that I had to shift my thinking on is I am not a failure at marriage.
Mhm.
So I got married. I've been married twice and divorced twice. The first time I got married, it was right out of high school. I had no business getting married that young. That ties back to all of the belief systems that you're raised with and all of that. And it was not a healthy marriage. And that my first husband was the one that ended it after 9 years. So when I got married the second time, I was, wanted to make sure that everything worked. Nobody in my family had been divorced, so I was the only one that had ever been through it. And when I got to this point 30 years later, where I knew that this was the route that I was going to have to go, I heard that voice in my head saying, well, you're a two-time failure. You're a two-time loser, whatever, and that doesn't mean that you're a loser. It doesn't mean you're a failure. What it what I do strongly encourage people to do, and what I wish I had done after that first marriage, was do the therapy and do the work that I did after the second divorce. I wish I had done it back then because I wasn't aware of the patterns and the behaviors and the beliefs that I had brought into my relationships with me that did not serve me. They did not serve me as an adult. And I wish I had done that work back then. So if you're struggling, if you're going through any kind of challenge right now, there's all kinds of resources that are available. People automatically think, therapy's expensive, and it can be. But most companies, I've been in HR for nearly 30 years, most companies have employee assistance programs as part of their benefits. Talk to your HR person, see if you have an EAP program, because most of those give you 4 or 5 visits for free per year. So it's a starting point. It's a place to get some help from a qualified professional to help you start to look at things, because if you do that work now, it could save you a long marriage that ends up failing, getting very clear on the things that you need to get clear on before you go into another relationship.
Yeah. I would imagine that one of the biggest hurdles would be the embarrassment. You're embarrassed about it, so you've got to get over that.
Yeah.
Get over it.
Yeah.
um, so are you kind of is this kind of like a self-reflection, taking a little break, don't just jump right into it and look back at maybe yourself and
Yes.
realign yourself?
Yes. One of the things that I talk about in my book is that it's tempting when we go through a relationship that's falling apart like that. It's very tempting to say, well, it's his fault or it's her fault. I
Mhm.
did everything I could. But only one of us doing this isn't, whatever that may be. It's very easy to point the finger at somebody else. But when we point the finger at somebody else, we lose that opportunity to hold the mirror up and say, in my case, for example, okay, Anne, you've been married twice and this is the second divorce. And even though those two marriages were very different, you were in common. So was there a pattern that you were repeating with the men that you chose? Was there a pattern that you were repeating with behaviors that you brought into the relationship? When you take that time to reflect and look at those things with the help of someone, because sometimes it's hard for us to work through, especially when we don't know what we don't know. When you take the time to work through those things with a qualified professional, it's life changing. I look back on all the things that I learned and the lessons that I apply, and it all takes practice. You don't magically get a mortarboard with a tassel and you graduated and you're good and you never have those behaviors again. Um, it's a work in progress, but the insight that you get from that is just incredibly valuable.
Yeah. Um, you talk about the domino effect. Is this something going along the lines of a domino effect, or can you explain to us what the domino effect really is?
So I think of the domino effect as, within the relationship itself, every little thing that I allowed just continued for those dominoes to keep falling.
Mm,
And once I made the decision that I was going to end it, that I needed to move on, that was a whole nother domino train that I set into motion. And so thinking about it from the perspective of, if I take this action, what are the downstream effects? If I allow this disrespect, or if I allow this red flag and ignore it, or if I tolerate this or that, what is the long-term effect? Because now those dominoes are going. That domino train is flying. Same with making a decision like this. If I decide that I need to end this relationship, or if I decide that I want to work on this relationship, what are the repercussions? What could potentially happen? And it's good to give that some thought, not to let it freeze us, because sometimes it can freeze us into inaction, like, well, I don't want to rock the boat, or I don't know what's going to happen, so it's better for me just to stay in status quo. But really be thinking about, what could potentially happen as a result of that
okay.
decision.
I want folks to know that today's conversation is with Ann L. Smith, and you can find her at annlsmith.com. Ann is the author of Gray Divorce, My Life Rewritten. So, Life Rewritten, and I kind of want to stick on this topic, but move forward after you've made this decision and you've realized that you have to do this. And we're talking about divorce, separation, get out of that place that you're in. You're over 60.
Yes.
What do you do afterwards? I mean, I've had conversations with some friends who have gone through something similar where they've either lost someone that they've been with for a long time over health reasons, things like that, or they have actually gotten divorced. And it's their thing is, I'm old now.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say 60 is old, but that's in their head is I'm old now.
Yeah.
I I don't know if I want to get in a relationship, or I don't feel like I want to, but what do I do because I feel a little lonely?
Yeah.
What have you done to to put those feelings away. And I'm going to be personal and ask, so did you get into a relationship?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Okay.
So, but it was with a lot more knowledge and a lot more planning and forethought and clarity that I had never had before in my life. Before we get to that, though, I will say that once I separated and bought my own place for the first time ever, I'd been a homeowner many years, but it was the first time I had one just solely by myself. I was very content. I was happy. There was huge relief. I didn't feel like I was walking around on eggshells anymore. I didn't feel like I had to do anything. For the first time ever, I just had to take care of myself. I didn't have anything else to worry about. So that was a huge relief. I found comfort in my own home. I was happy. There were times that it was lonely, but it wasn't terrible. It's okay. It's better than what I just left because I was extremely lonely in that marriage, and you're really stuck then when you're in a marriage and lonely. Whereas when you're by yourself and lonely, you can do different things. But so I was very content and I was happy to be where I was. I really had no intention of getting into a relationship quickly because I wanted to heal. I wanted to spend the time to heal and take care of myself. And so I spent a year in therapy and doing what I needed to do to take care of myself and become whole and feel very secure with who I was. I did take a course actually because at that point I was living in a very small coastal town. I don't go to church. I don't go to bars because I don't drink. I work from home. How are you going to meet people? Right. And the thought of online dating absolutely petrified me because when I last dated, that didn't exist. And so I found a course that helped with, here's some things that you can do not only to keep yourself safe, but also how do you vet people? How do you make sure that you're meeting, good quality people? And so I took that course and I really wasn't too terribly concerned about I was fine being by myself, but as I thought about retirement, I was like, I want to travel. I want to do things. I want to experience things. And yes, I'm a big girl. I can travel by myself, but I wanted somebody to share those experiences with. And so back to your comment about I'm old, that sort of thing. In my mind, I'm thinking it's probably going to take a while to find somebody. I'm 61, 62, whatever. And so I did go ahead and dip my toe into that online dating world, but with very, very clear guidelines and kind of rules for myself of what I wanted and what I needed in a relationship. It actually happened pretty quickly. I was shocked that it happened that quickly. I did get remarried in October. So just about 6 months ago, my husband found me. Because he was about 3 hours away from where I lived, and I was trying to keep it closer so that long distance relationships can be challenging, but it's a world of difference. This relationship is so easy and so healthy, and we can talk to each other about anything, but we have the same values and we have the same goals and we have the same outlook on things. We can challenge each other about things, but we're very much in alignment, and it's all the difference in the world. And I'm
Well, there's that word alignment again, and
yes.
that's what you got to do. I'm going to take a leap of faith and kind of say this is third time's a charm. Kind of kidding, but
Yeah.
the thing is, I think you've touched on something that is so vital to this online dating is, to me, being upfront and honest with who you are and what you want. And I'm going to add what you're worth, because sometimes I
Yes.
think in these situations, people will tend to stretch the truth, but
Yes.
then they don't get what they want because, well, you just said that you look like you're 20, but you're 70 and you look
Yeah.
like you're 55. So you
Yes.
put that out there, or you've altered your image. And then the
Yes.
person comes and they're disappointed, or you're disappointed in them,
Yes.
or this shouldn't make a difference, but it does. You're in that $25,000 category, but you're looking for a man or woman who makes $250,000.
Yeah.
You're going to be disappointed at every single turn, just about. So I think
Yes.
being upfront and honest if you're going to do this online dating thing is really with your expectation and what people should expect of you. Because I think you kind of said it earlier, as you set the expectation. So,
Yes. Yeah,
um,
and to unpack that just a little bit, knowing your worth, as you said, that is a huge thing. You also have to respect if someone has financially a lot more than you have to expect that there will be something that comes up like, do we need to do a prenup? Do we need to, how do we take care of our respective families? Those are adult conversations that you need to be prepared to have.
mhm,
And you're not necessarily having those conversations when you're 20 or 25 and neither one of you have much.
yeah. One thing that you said a few minutes ago, and it instantly popped in my head is you can be just as lonely with, with your spouse as you are by
Yes.
yourself, and sometimes it's better by yourself. I think you know the song. One is the loneliest.
Yes.
Two could be as bad as one. It's the
Yes.
loneliest number since the number one. So true.
Yes.
I hope
Yes.
there's not a copyright strike against me trying to sing that just now. But it is so true that you're better off being by yourself because then you're able to take care of yourself rather than having to think about somebody else. And two can be just as bad as one if you're in that situation.
Yeah, and when you're lonely in a relationship, you really are very limited. That's where, the unfortunate patterns of cheating happen and that kind of thing. It just don't go there. Don't do that. It just life is complicated enough. Don't make it more complicated. But I think you said it so well when you said know your worth. And that was one of the things that I had really struggled with. One of the belief systems that I had brought into my marriages was something that I had just incorporated as a young child. And that was, I have to prove my value to someone else before I have value as a person. And that's
Yeah.
not true. And I think that we also, as a culture, somewhat teach that subliminally when we say, you're going to find your other half. Well, that implies that you're only half a person. You're not half a person, you're a whole person. And we shouldn't even say that. We shouldn't think that. We are whole. We are individuals, and we bring that individuality into a relationship. We become a couple, but we still are individuals. And having that individuality is very important.
Yes, yes. And before we close out, I want to ask you, is there one thing or something that you could tell the audience what they might want to do or ask themselves? Something that might be simple.
If
I should
you,
clarify and say if they are in this type of a situation and they're doubting something, is there something that they could do?
yeah, if somebody's feeling stuck, whether it's stuck in a relationship, stuck in a job, stuck in a situation of some sort, one of the things that I recommend saying is, asking yourself is, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid will happen if I change my situation? And then be honest with yourself about whatever that fear or those fears are, and then examine those fears. Because oftentimes when we admit them out loud or write them down or whatever, we look at them and we say, okay, well, that's unrealistic, or that's really not that big of a deal. There's
Yeah.
a way to flip the switch and think about it from a different perspective. So, being honest with yourself, what is it that you're afraid of if you change something or take a step to do something? The other question is identifying what you have control over. What can I change? If I cannot relieve this relationship, or I don't feel like that's the best choice, what can I change? There are things that we have control over. We may not be able to control what's going on in the world, but we have control over what we have in our lives. And so if working on that relationship is something that you have control over, then do that. Focus on the things that you can focus on. And oftentimes it's the little steps that build up momentum. We're not expecting anybody to go out and just, wipe the slate clean and start all over again. It took a long time for me to get to that decision. So, what are the little steps? How do I take care of myself a little bit better every day? How do I give myself space every day to feel the things that I'm feeling and to acknowledge those feelings. And those are some really good initial steps to get you out of that stuck pattern.
Well, there you have it. Follow those steps. And hopefully, if you are in that situation and you need help or you've just gotten out of it, it's okay to ask for help. We're talking
Yes.
professional help and things like that. So, again, I just want to let everybody know that today's conversation was with Ann L. Smith. Find her at annlsmith.com. Ann is the debut author of Gray Divorce, My Life Rewritten. Ann, thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.